Jason and I, he's my colleague in making these videos, went to Sugar Island in July to shoot some footage of island scenes. The current owner of the home built by Felicitas Church on the northeast corner of the island are Joe McCoy and his wife. Their historic piece of property figures prominently in this video, and they graciously allowed us to spend some time filming there. Hello folks, and welcome to another of the history videos. We are on Sugar Island, and we are at a very historic part of Sugar Island, thanks to the willingness of Mr. Joe McCoy, who now owns this property, to have us do some filming here as I talk about island history. So thank you very much, Joe.
Mr. Arbic, we appreciate you coming down here, and I appreciate the work you put into the history on Sugar Island. I read a couple of your books, and I think they're fantastic, and you're welcome to do anything you want.
Well, thank you very much.
To get the story out.
All right. That feels good. Look at the view here, Jason. Is this beautiful or what? And by the way, that's my cousin going by in his new boat. That's Squirrel Island right across the river. I am delighted to be at this particular spot to do the video about Sugar Island and the old shipping channel. As I said, introducing Mr. McCoy, we are at Churchville Point, a very historic spot, and the house that you see behind me perhaps, or you will see, was built in 1862 by Felicitas Church, who had a trading post here back when this was the main route of shipping traffic, something that we call the Old Channel. You'll be seeing a map of Sugar Island and me beside it pointing to a specific spot at the north end of the big lake to the east of Sugar Island called Lake George. And so I'm pointing essentially to the spot where I am sitting right now as Jason is recording this video. Because the St. Mary's River, with Sugar Island right in the middle of it, was the easiest way to travel until relatively recently, the island was literally in the mainstream of human interchange that took place from any distance away. The natural deep-water connection between the Sioux and points south passed east of Sugar Island through a stretch known as Lake George. The name goes back to the early French. They called Sugar Island Île Saint-Georges, or St. George's Island. You'll see a map on the screen that was done in 1744 by a Frenchman named Nicolas Balin. And on that, you should be, as we zoom in on it, you should be able to see Île Saint-Georges written on the island, and at the south end, Lac Saint-Georges for St. George's Lake. So the name Lake George is a remnant of that 18th century French map and what they referred to as both the island and the lake. A Google Earth image that will come up on the screen makes this island's key location within the entire St. Mary's River from the Sioux to Detour quite clear. The red path on the map shows the route long taken by all vessels, except canoes, passing between Lake Superior and Lake Huron. Incidentally, the path colored yellow on the map is the international boundary between the United States and Canada. When you see the similar paths, it helps to confirm the principle used to determine the boundary in this area way back in 1814. It should run in the middle of the navigable channel, thus allowing ships from both nations to operate. Before any dredging occurred, ships from the lower lakes coming to the Sioux passed through Lake George and around the north end of Sugar Island, right where we are right now. You can see on the Google Earth image or on the next map, this meant that upbound ships went along Sugar Island's eastern and northern coasts before rejoining the other branch of the river above Little Rapids. Downbound ships followed the same route in the other direction. Locations at both ends of Lake George were strategic spots to service passing ships. In about 1846, a New Yorker named Philetus Church established a trading post and built a deep water wharf to serve ships at the north end. That's where we are right at the moment. And to this day, the location is known as Churchville Point. See the spot labeled number 1 on the map. His trading post was not far from the Garden River Native community in Ontario. And the house back behind me was the house that was built here at the trading post in 1862. Close to being right across the river is the Garden River Native community in Ontario. One of Church's major commodities for sale, and this really seems surprising to me, was raspberry jam that local women made from wild raspberries harvested by the First Nations people from Garden River. The picture we have, courtesy of Jack Dio at Superior Views in Marquette, shows how important the jam trade was with the big sign right on the building. A spot at the south end of the map, labeled number 2, is East Nebish Rapids, which had a relatively deep natural channel running through it. Just to its south was another wharf where ships could take on wood, run by Allen Rains from 1877 until about 1894. But let's return to the Churches briefly. Philetus and Elizabeth Church's firstborn was named Jesse Wells Church. He went by J. Wells. He was a youth when his family settled here on Sugar Island and quickly became a sailor and a boat builder, and you can see why. The river was right out his front door. I got to examine a diary he kept. Here's a typical entry, and I quote, May 25th, 1867, Saturday. Wind, west and northwest, late afternoon. Rain, more or less all day. No one worked much. Steam tug Peck, down 6. Dobbins, 4. They both got their toes aground, made a jam. Tug Stranger, Captain McFarland, up to the jam and got aground. Mr. Church's entry means that 2 tugs, one of them towing a string of 6 schooners downriver, and the other towing a string of 4, grounded in shallow water in Lake George, and the tug Stranger, coming upriver, ran aground trying to get around the blockage. An entry in J. Wells' journal states, and I quote, August 18th, 1867, Sunday. Wind northwest, a gale, rainy, cold. Vessel Union up. Mrs. Lincoln and son Teddy on board. Came into the house and talk and drink wine. Nice party on board, end quote. So there you have it. Talk about being in the mainstream. The widow and a son of a very popular and important president in United States history were on Sugar Island chatting with J. Wells Church over a glass of wine 157 years ago as we make this video on the same spot. Tad was only 14 years old, so he probably had raspberry jam on bread. Now, I ask you, how long will it be before anything quite that mainstream happens again in the eastern UP? Schooners were a major part of the lake fleet for much of the 19th century. And you'll see a drawing showing a tug towing a string of 3 schooners on the screen at some point. The narrow channels of the St. Mary's River made for tough sailing compared to open waters where tacking was possible with unfavorable winds. So steam-powered tugs often towed a string of schooners through the river in both directions. Imagine this scene down near Detour. A tugman, already having put together a string of schooners, is using a bullhorn to negotiate a price with the captain of another schooner to add to his tow to increase his revenue. This kind of traffic ran the St. Mary's River for about 4 or 5 decades, starting in about 1860. The old channel east and north of Sugar Island, had many turns. It was narrow, as you've seen on this video, and generally wasn't favorable for nighttime navigation. When the Wetzel Lock was completed in 1881, the push to dredge a channel through Little Rapids and Hay Lake got stronger. That route would shorten the trip from the Sioux to Detour by about 11 miles. That's almost 20%. And also facilitate placement of navigational lights to permit nighttime navigation. Dredging at Little Rapids altered them significantly. The new channel's path cut right through Island Number 1, the largest island in the rapids. Part of the island was removed, and now there are 2 islands called Island Number 1. One of them is on the Sugar Island side of the channel, and the other is on the mainland side. A very good friend of mine, Bill Garish, who is a talented commercial artist, used an aerial photo of Little Rapids to give an idea of the original configuration of Little Rapids. He used a Corps of Engineers map that showed the original Little Rapids area, and he put ghost images of the land removed when Little Rapids was dredged. And you can see that on the screen in a green. All of that land was removed. This channel down the west side of Sugar Island opened in 1894. What that did is it made the passage through the old channel virtually obsolete, and this major strategic point, Churchville Point, where we are, became a backwater essentially. Bill's image was used on an interpretive panel on Rotary Island. The panel's there, and on the historic Water Street Walkway, and on the Canal Walkway, by the way, were created for the city of Sault Ste. Marie by the Chippewa County Historical Society, working with Paul Ignatowski of Sioux Printing Company. Well, that was nice. I don't get to the island much anymore, but it was an important part of my childhood and youth. Later, as we raised our 3 boys, they also gathered some memories from visits to my mother, and as we harvested firewood for years. Why don't you go up top and take some video from up there?
I don't think they let you do that, Bernie.
Huh? Yeah, just tell them Bernie sent you.